New charges today in the murder of a Ferguson man who reported the rape of his own daughter. 3 family members stand indicted for the murder of Kareem Warren, who was gunned down after refusing a bribe to drop charges in a sexual assault case. Our Megan Kernan is live outside the Ferguson Police Department, where prosecutors announced indictments just hours ago.
Kareem Warren's best friend tells me he was the best person on earth and a great father. His family still hasn't come back home since the killing. And these 3 men are now charged, accused of working together to silence that father, murdering him, and then murdering their own hitman.
What does it cost to protect your child? For Kareem Warren, a father in Ferguson, the answer was everything. When his teenage daughter told him she'd been raped, he did what most families are too scared to do. He went to the police. They offered him $12,000 to drop it. He refused. Days later, 5 bullets ripped through his front door. His children watched him die. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a murder. This was a message. And girl, the story that unfolded after, you are not ready. Step into grave kisses, where the shadows whisper, and the secrets the world tried to bury scream to be heard. This isn't just true crime. This is truth with teeth. Stories that sting. Cases that crawl under your skin. Names that refuse to stay forgotten. We don't chase headlines, we chase ghosts. Because here, every story deserves one last heartbeat. So if you're the kind who can't look away, who wants to know what really happened, who believes every story deserves its voice, this is where you belong. Hit subscribe, stay close, because the truth doesn't rest easy, and neither do we. Before the headlines, before the courtroom, before his name became attached to one of the most disturbing cases Ferguson had seen, Kareem Warren was just a regular father. He worked hard, kept his yard clean, looked after his kids. He wasn't out here trying to be some public figure or start any kind of trouble. The man just wanted to live his life and protect his family. That's it. But in late spring 2025, everything changed. His teenage daughter came to him with something no parent ever wants to hear. She told him she'd been sexually assaulted, and not by some stranger, by someone they knew. Someone the family had trusted, a man named Lever Harmon. Now, let me tell you something about what usually happens in cases like this. The statistics don't lie. Most families hesitate. They're scared of backlash, scared nobody will believe them, scared of what might happen if they speak up. A lot of people never report it at all. But Kareem Warren, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight into the Ferguson Police Department and made a formal report, gave them a clear, detailed statement about what his daughter told him. And he made sure they understood this needed to be taken seriously. The case got assigned to a special victims unit. Not long after, Harmon was charged, statutory rape, multiple counts of sodomy. The legal system was moving, and Warren was the reason why. But anybody who's been through this process knows it's exhausting. Police interviews, depositions, court filings, medical examinations, all that bureaucratic friction that comes with trying to make the system care about one child. But Warren didn't back down. Friends said he stayed steady, quiet, but firm. He'd finish his shift at work, then head straight to appointments with detectives and victim advocates. When his daughter needed to show up for preliminary hearings, he was right there in the front row. Still, people around him started noticing changes. He became more cautious. One neighbor said they saw him checking his door locks twice before going to bed. Another mentioned he'd talked about getting strange phone calls, people asking questions about the case that they shouldn't have even known about. Then came the offer. And this is where it gets real. According to court filings, Harmon's relatives, his uncle Anthony L. Young and his cousin Anthony D. Young, approached Warren with a proposition. They offered him $12,000, cash, in exchange for his silence, They wanted him to withdraw his daughter's statement. Stop cooperating with prosecutors. Just make it all go away. Now, $12,000? For a man living modestly in a working-class neighborhood, that kind of money could have erased some bills, could have made life a little easier. But to Warren, it was an insult. He turned it down flat, told a friend later, "I can't put a price on my child's pain." Like, imagine being that person. Imagine having the courage to look at $12,000 and say no, because your daughter's truth matters more. That's who Kareem Warren was. Period. But with that refusal, everything shifted. Investigators believe that was the moment things went from intimidation to something far worse. When the bribe didn't work, the plan changed. In the days leading up to July 8th, 2025, cell phone records will later show that Harmon and both of the Youngs were in constant communication. They were also talking to another man, Andrew Klaus. Klaus had a history, violent offenses, already known to local police. And prosecutors say he was the one who agreed to do what they wouldn't risk doing themselves. He would handle the problem. He would silence the father who wouldn't be bought. At the time, nobody outside their circle knew what was being planned. To the neighbors, Warren's home still looked normal. Kids playing in the yard, a man washing his car, porch lights on at night. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but underneath all that calm, something deadly was closing in. It's a pattern investigators say they see too often. Threats that start as whispers, a bribe that turns into a demand that becomes a plan. In early July, Warren told a friend he was ready to get through the court process and put everything behind them. He believed the system would protect him. He trusted the process. But the system wasn't ready for how far his daughter's abuser and his family were willing to go. On the evening of July 7th, the night before the shooting, Warren talked to a relative on the phone. They made plans for the weekend, maybe a family cookout. There was no fear in his voice. If he suspected danger was coming, he didn't show it. The next night, everything shattered. The sound of gunfire cut through the humid Missouri air. 5 rounds. Through glass. Through the front door of a father who had done nothing but stand up for his child. By the time police arrived, Kareem Warren was gone. The evening air over Ferguson, Missouri was still and heavy on July 8, 2025. Streetlights cast that familiar yellow glow along Lang Drive as the neighborhood settled into its summer rhythm. Inside his home, Kareem Warren was with his children. The same home where, just weeks earlier, he'd made up his mind to see justice served for what happened to his daughter. Shortly before 9 that night, that promise was shattered. The front door's glass exploded inward under a burst of gunfire. Neighbors later told police they heard a quick succession of shots.
Neighbor Hugh Deberly was home the day Warren was killed.
Next thing I know, I heard about 4 or 5 gunshots. Then I seen them running across my yard into a car, and they took off. They tried to revive him, and his kids are out there.
Then came the screams. When first responders got inside, Warren was collapsed near the entryway. He'd been struck multiple times. His children were in that house. They saw their father fall. The storm door was blown through with holes. Glass shards scattered across the living room floor. Nothing was stolen. No drawers pulled open. No signs of a struggle. Whoever came to that house knew exactly why they were there and what they wanted to accomplish. Detectives found .40 caliber shell casings on the walkway and near the steps. The shooter had fired from close range every round, going through the same pane of glass. The tight grouping told investigators something important. The killer hadn't panicked. They were composed, deliberate. This wasn't random violence. This was an execution. Neighbors described seeing figures running through yards, disappearing into the darkness toward a waiting car. One person said the vehicle was a gray sedan. That detail, it would turn out to be critical. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station captured that same type of car heading toward Long Drive minutes before the shooting, then speeding away right after. The registration number was partially visible. Investigators ran it and traced it to a man named Andrew Klaus, someone already known to local law enforcement for violence weapons charges. By the next morning, police had connected that gray car, those shell casings, and cell phone data that placed Klaus near Warren's home right when the shooting happened. But girl, the story didn't end there. Not even close. A few hours after Warren's murder, same night, another call came in to St. Louis police. A vehicle burning on a side street. When they got there, they found a man inside, shot to death. The victim was Andrew Klaus. Let that sink in. The shooter who had just killed Kareem Warren was now dead himself. The second crime scene told investigators everything they needed to know. The man who silenced Warren had been silenced. Fragments of a handgun grip were recovered from the charred wreckage. Residue in the vehicle matched the same .40 caliber ammunition used at Warren's house.
On July 8th of this year, Corey Warren was shot and killed by Andrew Klaus at his home in Ferguson, Missouri. Andrew Klaus was later killed that same day.
Klaus's body was later found in North City, and
now we've got two murders, hours apart, clearly connected. And the digital trail? It was all there. Detectives started following the breadcrumbs backward. Phone calls between Lever Harmon, Anthony L. Young, Anthony D. Young, and Klaus, all in the days and hours leading up to both shootings. Patterns started emerging. Brief messages, location pings moving together, devices switching off minutes before the attacks, then powering back on miles away. The timeline prosecutors would later present was chilling in how simple it was. Harmon, already charged with raping Warren's teenage daughter, wanted the witness gone. His relatives, the Youngs, handled the logistics and the money. Klaus was brought in to carry out the shooting. The promise of payment? It ended with his death before the night was even over. His car torched to erase the evidence. For the Warren family, there had been no warning, no chance to prepare. The man who refused a $12,000 bribe, who put his faith in the courts, was gone in seconds. His children were left standing in the same doorway, where their father made his last stand for truth. In the days that followed, that quiet residential block turned into a corridor of flashing lights and unmarked cars. Detectives sifted through broken glass and bullet trajectories, reconstructing every second. Everything pointed to one thing: intent. Nothing about this was random. When the story hit local news, the city reacted with shock. Reporters called it one of the most senseless acts of violence.
One of the most senseless acts of violence that I've reached and have seen this year.
Ferguson Police Chief Troy Doyle says Corey Warren's killing was calculated, cruel, and personal.
Neighbors talked about a man who was devoted to his children, the kind of person who'd offer help without being asked.
Warren's neighbors remember him as a devoted dad and friend.
Well, they took a person's life. You know, a person was trying to do right, and they killed him for it. So they should have to pay too.
One neighbor, Hugh Deverly, said Warren used to cut his grass for him. When Hugh tried to pay him, Warren wouldn't take the money.
And for Hugh,
Corey was really good father. He, like I said, he cut my grass for me. I offered to pay him. He wouldn't take no money.
That's the kind of man he was. To the community, Warren's death was more than a tragedy. It was a statement about what happens when good people stand up against fear and corruption. But here's what the killers didn't count on. Every attempt they made to erase the crime actually exposed it even more. Forensic teams started piecing together a web that connected all three suspects. Cell tower data showed Harmon, Anthony L. Young, and Anthony D. Young moving along the same routes Klaus had taken that night. Their phones went dark at the exact same time. When they powered back on, the pings placed them miles away near the rural area where Klaus's burning vehicle was found. Surveillance footage showed a car registered to the Young family following Klaus's sedan through an intersection not long before the first gunshots on Long Drive. The pattern was too precise to be coincidence. Each man had been in communication that evening, and as the hours passed, their messages got shorter and more cryptic. Words like done, handled, quiet. Nobody mentioned Warren's name directly, but the timing matched every major event of that night. Then, there was the money. Over several days in early July, almost $12,000 had been withdrawn from accounts connected to the Youngs. Small transactions, broken up to avoid detection. That was the same amount Warren had been offered to abandon the sexual assault case. After the murder, the deposits and cash movements stopped completely. The accounts went silent. One of the Youngs' vehicles drew even more attention. License plates had been removed. The identification number on the frame had been partly ground away. Inside the trunk, investigators found traces of fuel and melted plastic chemical fingerprints that matched the accelerant used in Klaus's destroyed car. The evidence was forming a chain that led straight back to Harmon's circle. The prosecution's theory made grim sense. Harmon, facing the collapse of his entire life if the case went to trial, turned to his relatives for help when Warren refused the bribe. They brought in Klaus to handle the shooting, promising payment once it was finished. When Warren was dead, those same men killed Klaus to erase the last witness. Then they burned the car to bury the weapon. By early October, detectives had everything they needed. The file they brought to prosecutors was hundreds of pages long. Interviews, phone logs, surveillance records, autopsy results, forensic analyses. Every single strand pointed to deliberate planning. Moving on to what happened next. October 29th, 2025. Nearly 4 months after the killing, the street. Lewis County Justice Center filled with reporters, cameras, and family members waiting to hear what many thought might never come answers. A clerk's voice carried through the chamber as 3 names were read into the record. Lever Harmon, Anthony L. Young, Anthony D. Young. 3 relatives bound by blood and, prosecutors say, by a plan to silence a father. The indictments listed the charges with the precision of cold law.
First 6 charges are 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 2 counts of armed criminal action, 1 count of knowingly exploding or burning, and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence.
Investigators say this stems from an attempt to bribe Warren to drop charges in a criminal case where Lavore Harmon was accused of sexually assaulting Corey's daughter.
Outside the courthouse, Ferguson Police Chief Troy Doyle stood before the press. His words were deliberate.
It was a tragic and probably one of the most senseless acts of violence that I've reached and have seen this year. Let me speak directly to the families here. The families of these victims, our hearts are with you. And it was with them in every part of this case. So every interview, every search warrant that was conducted, the pain of these victims of what they shared, the families of these victims, what they shared, it was always at the forefront.
The victims' names were read. Kareem Warren, the father who had reported the rape of his teenage daughter, and Andrew Klaus, the man investigators believe was hired to kill him, then killed himself to tie up loose ends. For the first time since that July evening, the full narrative of what happened on that quiet Ferguson block was laid out in legal form. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was evidence, affidavits, shell casings, the burned remains of a vehicle, cell tower records, and a story of intimidation that ended with 2 deaths. Each of the accused was ordered held on a $2 million bond. Harmon was booked into Street Lewis County Jail. The Youngs, already in federal custody on unrelated charges, were transferred under detainer. Their attorneys offered no immediate comment. Prosecutors clarified something important. While the killings had all the hallmarks of murder for hire, that specific charge hadn't been filed yet. But it could be. Further evidence might support it. The lead prosecutor told the press that parts of the investigation remained active. For Warren's friends and neighbors, the indictments brought both validation and pain. They'd waited more than 3 months for names, for charges, for any sense that the system had noticed what was taken from them. Hearing those indictments spoken out loud brought the first taste of justice, but it also reopened every wound. Across the street from the courthouse, a small crowd held candles. They said his name quietly, Kareem Warren, like they were afraid that speaking it too loudly might disturb the fragile progress of the case. One sign read, "A father who did the right thing." The courtroom proceedings were brief but heavy. Prosecutors outlined how the conspiracy unfolded, how Harmon, desperate to avoid accountability for raping Warren's daughter, turned to his family, how the Youngs coordinated the bribe, then the hit, how Klaus was paid to pull the trigger, then eliminated to protect the others. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital footprints, financial transactions, surveillance footage, witness statements, forensic analysis. It all pointed in one direction. The defense attorneys said little. The accused maintained their innocence. But the weight of the case, the sheer volume of evidence, sat in that courtroom like a presence all its own. Prosecutors said the trial would likely take years to conclude. But for the family, the sentence had already begun long before any courtroom. They live each day with the echo of that night, the sound of shattering glass, the unanswered question of what might have been. And yet, even through the grief, there's something else. Pride. Pride that when confronted with fear, their father stood firm. By November 2025, Ferguson still carried the quiet weight of what happened on Long Drive. Porch lights on that street burned a little longer, now left on through the night. Families who once left doors unlocked started checking them twice. And though the investigation had brought answers, the air of loss remained. At the center of it all was a man most people in the community hadn't known by name until he was gone. Kareem Warren wasn't a politician, not a public figure. He was a father who believed that truth mattered, that doing what was right, no matter how uncomfortable, was the only way to protect his child. When he walked into the Ferguson Police Department that day to report the rape of his daughter, he couldn't have imagined that decision would cost him his life. But he made it anyway. The charges now filed against Harmon and both Youngs read like the anatomy of a betrayal. Prosecutors allege Harmon sought to erase accountability first with money, then with violence. When the bribe failed, the plan became murder. When the murder was done, they erased the hitman who carried it out. That night in July revealed not just the cruelty of the crime, but the courage of the victim. Warren could have taken the money, could have looked the other way, could have convinced himself that silence was safer. Instead, he chose principle. He chose his daughter's voice over his own safety. And that refusal became the hinge on which the entire case turned, the one act that would later expose every person responsible. In the weeks after the indictments, local reporters revisited his story. They spoke with neighbors who remembered him fixing cars in his driveway, co-workers who described him as reliable and kind. Every single account painted the same picture, a man with no interest in drama or attention, who loved his children more than anything. Churches organized vigils. Parents attended safety meetings. Counselors offered support to victims of assault who feared coming forward. The case became a mirror, reflecting how fragile justice can feel in the face of intimidation. For the detectives who worked the case, Warren's murder was a reminder of why witness protection exists. of how quickly fear can destroy trust in institutions meant to defend the innocent. They knew that solving the crime wouldn't bring back what had been lost, but it could reaffirm something larger that silence, however violently enforced, could not win. The trial is still to come. The defendants maintain their innocence, and the courts will determine guilt. But regardless of the verdicts, the story of Kareem Warren has already taken on a shape larger than the crime itself. It's a story of a father who refused to trade integrity for safety, who believed his daughter deserved justice, who held that belief until his last breath. For those who pass by his home today, there are reminders everywhere. The repaired door, the candle wax on the sidewalk, the hand-drawn notes left by neighbors' children. One reads simply, "Thank you for being brave." His courage forced light into a place built on secrecy. It revealed the cost of truth in a world where doing the right thing can make you a target. But it also showed something enduring, that conviction, once spoken, cannot be erased by violence. What began as a killing meant to bury the truth has instead immortalized it. The cover-up failed, and the silence it tried to impose has become a testament for Ferguson, for the courts, and for every parent who has ever faced the impossible choice between safety and justice. His name now carries a weight all its own, a reminder that justice, though fragile, is worth every risk it demands. Kareem Warren stood for his daughter when it would have been easier to walk away. He refused to be bought, refused to be silenced. And in the end, his story didn't die with him. It lives on in the charges filed, in the community that remembers, in every person who hears his name and understands what it means to choose courage over fear. That's his legacy. That's what they couldn't kill. That's what remains. Period. This is why we tell these stories, so names like Kareem Warren don't get forgotten. If this one moved you, make sure you're subscribed to Grave Kisses TV. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next case. Leave a comment, share this video, and let's keep these conversations going. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, courage matters. We'll see you soon.